Forget your responsibilities for a while. Hit the road, find new faces, new friends, a new city, a new perspective. Let yourself go. This was the mantra of the Beat Generation, most iconically captured in Jack Kerouac's 1957 novel On the Road. It's electric, it's seductive, it's romantic, but is it actually good advice? 2 years ago I travelled to Marseille. It was the first time I'd really been travelling since before the lockdown, and I remember for the first few hours as I rode a bus into the city being euphoric with excitement. That anticipation, that newness. If we're lucky enough to have the means, many of us will know this experience. It was my on-the-road feeling. And to me it feels appropriate to describe this as a state of flow. A state of being that is in line with the mantra of the Beat Generation to let yourself go. In fact, just listening to Kerouac talk about his travels, you get a sense of someone who is fully engaged in a flow-like state.
Because I believed in what I saw. I was traveling west one time at the junction of the state line of Colorado, its arid western one, and the state line of poor Utah. I saw in the clouds, huge and massed above the fiery golden desert of Evenfall, the great image of God with forefinger pointed.
So does this mean that flow is the exclusive reserve of travellers, hitchhikers, and wanderers pulling on the threads of some effervescent yearning to explore? Well, no. It's also the mantra of high-functioning professionals and elite athletes. I believe that when you watch Lionel Messi weave his way towards the goal, or Simone Biles perform astounding acrobatic feats, you are watching someone in a state of flow. But wait a second, this is not where the journey begins. It's the consequence of many tens of thousands of hours of work. And even if we're not at the level of elite athletes or artists, the development of discipline and resilience is so essential to living a meaningful life. But what happens if you haven't developed this discipline? Even worse, what if letting yourself go is not an attempt to reach a higher state of being, but an excuse to run away from something? Maybe something difficult that you've hidden away in the dark corners of your life. Maybe Kerouac didn't mean for On the Road to be a bell ringer for a new generation of verve and excitement, but maybe he instead meant it as a warning. Dean Moriarty is a character at the heart of On the Road. He is based on the real-life Neil Cassidy. He is the good-looking friend who by all accounts was exciting, got laid a lot, and was the life and soul of the Beat movement. He knew how to let himself go. But let's take a step back. Aside from the partying, the drug-taking, and the sex, Dean has one noble goal: to become a writer. And it's a goal that for the most part, he fails at miserably. See, the difference between Kerouac and Cassidy was that Kerouac knew the meaning of discipline. He put many, many hours into his writing, and the result was a respectable bibliography and a strong candidate for the great American novel. Whereas Dean, yes, he was magnetic, but he didn't achieve his highest goals because he was addicted to alcohol and sex, and was running away from a childhood of loss, abuse, and pain. Now this brings us to the question of nihilism. I don't believe that On the Road, or Kerouac, or even Moriarty were nihilistic. They loved life. Existentialist? Probably. Hedonistic? Definitely. But nihilistic? Absolutely not. However, I do think that nihilism follows in the wake of Kerouac. This is, after all, a man who drank himself to death. And speaking personally, I know several people who idolized the Beats and their febrile lifestyle and the many different subcultures that stemmed from it, whose lives spiraled out of control and landed in very dark places. The importance of a father in the life of a child cannot be overstated. James Baldwin. A recurring theme in On the Road is the loss or absence of fathers, particularly from the lives of Sal and Dean. In real life, Kerouac didn't have much of a relationship with his dad, and Cassidy's dad was an abusive alcoholic. And given how much hurt this must have caused him, to me it's one of the biggest indictments of Kerouac and the beat philosophy of exploration and letting go, that he himself was then entirely absent from the life of his daughter Jan. Jan's mother Joan was the inspiration for the character that Sal, i.e. Jack, falls in love with at the end of On the Road. In real life, Joan became pregnant with Jack's daughter, but rather than facing down the demons of his childhood, Kerouac embraced his cowardly philosophy of running away from his problems, and flat out denied that Jan was his daughter. He didn't pay child support for a long time, and didn't even meet her until 10 years later, when a judge ordered that he take a paternity test, proving that he was indeed Jan's dad. After this, they only met once more, when Jan went to visit Jack at his house in Lowell, Massachusetts. Jan lived much of her early life in poverty, and even turned to prostitution to make ends meet. So much for the lionization of the beat philosophy. I suppose we can all draw our own conclusions from these tales. From my perspective, let yourself go can be great advice at the right time, but it certainly isn't a philosophy to live one's life by. And, as in the case of Kerouac himself, it can leave a wake of devastation and pain that continues a vicious cycle that could have been ended if only it had been confronted with courage and grace. There is one story at the very end of Jack's life that I'd like to tell, that gives me a little bit of solace when thinking about what happened between him and Jan. In the late 60s, Jan had managed to track her father down. She was pregnant with his grandchild and about to go on the road herself. Her father was in a bad way. His alcoholism had taken hold, and when she found him, he was drinking whiskey, just a couple of years away from death's door. And yet, when he met her, he was still courteous and warm in his own way. And I think about how Jan must have felt when her father, the great American novelist, who had previously rejected her, turned to her and said, "Sure, you can go to Mexico. Use my name. Write a book." And it gives me some relief to know that even in his twilight years, there was still a glimmer of that same beautiful electric Kerouac that I loved from his novels. But melancholy to think that he never became the father or grandfather that he could have been, if only he had slowed down the rush of life just a little bit, in order to squeeze out the deeper joys and gifts that it brings us in the long run. Thanks for watching everyone, I hope you liked and enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment with any thoughts you have, and I'll see you in the next one.